Before the fire escape existed, the official solution to a burning building was a rope, a single rope, tied to a bedpost, dropped from a window. That was it. That was the entire plan. In the 1850s, as American cities started stacking buildings 4, 5, 6 stories into the sky, the only evacuation strategy available to most residents was a length of rope. They had to buy themselves, store themselves, and remember to use while their floor was on fire. And it gets worse. The rope wasn't even standard. Some buildings provided nothing at all. Others gave tenants a canvas chute, a tube of fabric bolted to the window, that workers were expected to slide down in an orderly fashion while smoke filled the room behind them. Nobody tested whether this worked. Nobody required it to work. What makes this extraordinary isn't the danger. It's the indifference. City governments knew buildings were burning. They knew people were dying. And for decades, the official response was, figure it out yourself. The fire escape, when it finally came, was supposed to change all of that. It didn't. The first patented exterior fire escape in the United States appeared in 1887. Anna Connolly, a Philadelphia inventor, filed a patent for a metal bridge system that would connect adjacent rooftops, giving residents a horizontal escape route across buildings rather than a vertical drop to the street. Connolly's design was logical. It was safe. It was almost entirely ignored. What cities actually adopted was something cheaper, an iron platform bolted to the outside of the building, connected by a steep metal ladder, running down the exterior facade. It looked like safety. It was designed to look like safety. But the people who specified these structures, the landlords, the building owners, the contractors, had a very different priority in mind. They were not trying to save lives. They were trying to satisfy inspectors. The external fire escape emerged not from engineering, but from negotiation. Cities like New York and Chicago began passing tenement laws in the 1860s and 1870s, requiring buildings above a certain height to have some form of emergency egress. The landlord's response was to install the cheapest object that could technically be called an exit. Cast iron platforms, sometimes only 3 feet wide. Ladders pitched at angles too steep for a panicking person to descend. Bolts anchored into brick that hadn't been inspected since installation. In 1900, a survey of fire escapes in New York found that a significant portion of them were structurally unsound. Some were rusted through. Some had been installed without ever being tested. One inspector reported finding a fire escape ladder that had been bolted directly into a wooden beam. A beam that, in a fire, would be the first thing to burn. The fire escape had been invented, but it had been invented as paperwork. To understand why fire escapes were so consistently bad, you have to understand who was paying for them. In the tenement districts of New York, Chicago, and Boston, landlords owned buildings that housed dozens of families in spaces designed for a fraction of that number. These were profit machines built on minimal investment and maximum occupancy. Every dollar spent on infrastructure was a dollar not returned. Fire escapes fell into this calculation precisely. A building inspector could require one, a landlord could install one, but there was no requirement that it work. The specifications were vague by design. New York's Tenement House Act of 1867 required proper fire escapes without defining what proper meant. The follow-up legislation in 1879 added more detail, but still left enforcement to inspectors who were overworked, underpaid, and, in some documented cases, open to persuasion. The result was a system that gave everyone exactly what they wanted except the people living in the buildings. Landlords got cheap compliance, city governments got defensible records, inspectors got manageable caseloads, and tenants got iron structures bolted to the outside of their homes that had never been weight tested, that froze solid in winter, that collected garbage and laundry and children's toys until the exits were functionally blocked. A 1903 report by the New York Tenement House Department found escape routes obstructed in nearly half the buildings surveyed. Nobody was fined. Almost nobody was required to fix it. Then came March 25, 1911. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory occupied the top 3 floors of the Ash Building in Lower Manhattan. On that Saturday afternoon, 500 workers, most of them young immigrant women, were finishing their shift when fire broke out on the 8th floor. The building had fire escapes, 2 of them. One was blocked by a locked door that workers had never been given a key to. The other was a single iron ladder mounted on the exterior of the building that ended not at the ground, but at a second-floor skylight, a skylight that shattered under the weight of the first people to reach it. In 18 minutes, 146 people died. Some burned, some suffocated. Dozens jumped from the 9th floor windows rather than wait for the fire to reach them. The owners of the factory, Isaac Harris and Max Blank, were tried for manslaughter. They were acquitted. The jury found insufficient evidence that they knew the doors were locked, but the public investigation that followed produced something more important than a conviction. It produced documentation. Investigators went through the building record by record and found that the Ash Building had passed every fire safety inspection it had ever received. The fire escapes were compliant, the building was legal, and 146 people were dead. This was not an accident in the ordinary sense. It was the logical outcome of a system that had been measuring paperwork instead of safety for 40 years. The New York State Legislature responded to Triangle by forming the Factory Investigating Commission, a body that, over the next 4 years, would conduct one of the most thorough workplace safety investigations in American history. 2 names drove it: Robert F. Wagner Sr. and Al Smith. Both were young Democratic assemblymen from Manhattan's Lower East Side. Both had grown up in the tenement districts. Both understood, without needing to be told, what the gap between legally compliant and actually safe looked like from the inside. The commission sent investigators to 3,000 factories across New York State. They documented fire escapes that hadn't been inspected in years. They found ladders too steep to descend under normal conditions, let alone emergency ones. They found buildings with a single fire escape serving 200 workers. They found escape routes that led directly into enclosed courtyards with no exit to the street. In 4 years, the commission produced 56 pieces of legislation. New York rewrote its labor law, its building code, and its fire safety standards from the ground up. The key change wasn't a new requirement for fire escapes. It was a new philosophy about what fire escapes were for. Before Triangle, a fire escape was a box checked on an inspector's form. After Triangle, it had to function as an actual exit, tested, maintained, accessible, and wide enough to carry the number of people in the building above it. The difference sounds obvious. It had taken 40 years and 146 deaths to make it law. Even with stricter regulations, the external fire escape had a fundamental engineering problem that legislation alone couldn't fix. People freeze, not from cold, from panic. Study after study of fire evacuations found that people under genuine threat do not move efficiently down steep metal ladders on the exterior of a burning building. They hesitate. They look down. They grip the rails and stop. In a real fire, the external fire escape created a bottleneck at exactly the moment when bottlenecks were fatal. There was also a more basic problem. The fire escape was exposed to the fire. Buildings with exterior facades of wood, or even certain types of brick, could have fires that burned outward, directly compromising the escape route that was supposed to lead away from the flames. Engineers began pushing for internal fire stairs, enclosed concrete stairwells, pressurized to keep smoke out, running the full height of the building, accessible from every floor without going outside. The idea wasn't new, but it was expensive, and for decades, external fire escapes remained the default for existing buildings, because the cost of retrofitting internal stairs was prohibitive. The compromise that emerged was regulation by height and occupancy. Buildings above a certain height, or with more than a certain number of occupants, had to have internal stairs. Smaller buildings could keep the iron ladder on the outside. That compromise still exists today. You can see its legacy on almost any urban block in America. The black iron skeleton clinging to the exterior of older walk-ups, grandfathered into existence by the economics of renovation. Modern fire escape standards in the United States trace directly to the aftermath of Triangle and a series of subsequent disasters that kept the pressure on. The Coconut Grove nightclub fire in Boston in 1942 killed 492 people. Investigation found that the main exit was a revolving door, and that the crowd crush had jammed it shut within seconds. A secondary exit had been bolted closed to prevent customers from leaving without paying. Exit signs pointed to doors that opened inward into the crowd. The Hartford Circus tent fire in 1944 killed 167 people. The main tent had no permanent exits, just the entrance and a few performers' gaps in the canvas. Each disaster produced the same pattern. Investigators found that existing regulations had either not required adequate exits or had not been enforced. Each disaster produced new legislation. Each new law was more specific than the last. The National Fire Protection Association, founded in 1896 originally to standardize fire hose fittings, gradually became the body that wrote the codes. Their NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code, first issued in 1927 as a pamphlet called Outside Stairs for Fire Exits, is now the standard reference by most building codes in the United States. It runs to hundreds of pages. It specifies stair width to the inch. It specifies door swing direction, hardware type, illumination levels, maximum travel distance to an exit, and the exact wording that must appear on exit signs. Every one of those specifications exists because at some point, the absence of that specification killed someone. Here is what makes the fire escape genuinely strange as an object. It is one of the most visible pieces of safety infrastructure in any city. You cannot walk down a block of pre-war apartment buildings in New York, Chicago, or Boston without seeing dozens of them. They are impossible to ignore. They look authoritative. They look industrial. They look like something that has been carefully engineered for a specific purpose. And for most of their history, they were none of those things. The fire escape became an icon of urban architecture, photographed, painted, turned into metaphor, precisely because of how it looks. But how it looks was never the point. It was designed to satisfy a regulator, not to save a life. The platforms accumulated flower pots and air conditioners and bicycle tires. The ladders rusted. The bolts worked loose from the brick over decades of freeze and thaw. Today, in New York City alone, there are an estimated 200,000 fire escapes on residential buildings. The city inspects them on a complaint-driven basis. In a single year, inspectors have found thousands with structural defects. Bent railings, broken treads, anchor bolts that have corroded through. Most are still in compliance, because compliance, as it turned out, was always the easier thing to measure. The fire escape was supposed to be a temporary solution. Architects and engineers in the early 20th century expected it to disappear, replaced by internal stairs, sprinkler systems, and modern building design that made exterior egress obsolete. That hasn't happened. New buildings in the United States don't get external fire escapes anymore. Code requires internal fire stairs, sprinkler systems, pressurized stairwells, and automatic suppression. But the 200,000 escapes already bolted to existing buildings are going nowhere. The cost of removing them or replacing them with code-compliant alternatives is, in most cases, more than the building is worth. So the fire escape persists. Not because it works well, but because it's already there. It became a permanent fixture not through good design, but through economic inertia. That's the actual legacy of the fire escape. Not a triumph of engineering, not a story of innovation solving a problem. It's a story of a workaround, invented by people trying to avoid spending money, institutionalized by regulators trying to avoid conflict, and finally made marginally safer only after disasters made the alternative politically impossible. The fire escape is everywhere in American cities. It is one of the most visible symbols of urban safety infrastructure that exists, and it was designed from the beginning to be just good enough to get away with.